Attention on deck. It is now 10:40. I'm going to call this meeting back to order and yield to Mr. Morgan.
Yes, our next candidate is Matthew Morton.
Welcome, Mr. Morton. Come on up. So we're going to start this the same way we've so far done every candidate. I'm going to yield to our deputy mayor to bring in the first question.
Excellent.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for being here. Just very briefly, tell us about yourself, your character, your personality, and give us an insight by telling us one or two things that you like to do when you're not working. And you can take some of this time for an opening statement as well.
Sure. Well, the opening statement is thank you so much for having me. It is great to be here. It's been lovely meeting a lot of your staff members and getting to understand what's happening here in Palm Bay. Thank you to the community for showing up on a Saturday. That's always a good sign when people are engaged in the process. So I appreciate everyone that came out today to watch and to learn and to offer their opinions. So about myself, I've been interested in public service since I can remember. It's one of those funny lines, but it's absolutely true. Watching It's a Wonderful Life, the classic movie when George Bailey says, I'm going to go build things and plan modern cities. And I said, what? You can do that for a living? And I think I was 13 years old at that time. And so went through school with a keen interest in local government at an early age and in service. My parents were both very politically minded in terms of always giving back to the community. My dad used to drag us out to the national parks and we'd be the guys carrying buckets of water and raking up pine needles. And so it just got instilled at an early age. I started in planning and community development. I thought that was the most logical place to serve in government because I had an interest in people. I had an interest in landscapes. I had an interest in the built environment. So it was planning. And after a few years of working through different planning channels and working up through community development, I realized I wanted to leave a legacy for future generations. I wanted to have an impact in what I was doing beyond processing. And I got the unique opportunity to get appointed to a commission early in my career to work on the Hanford Reach 20-year interim action plan, which was the reclamation of the World War II nuclear facility under Secretary of Energy Bill Richardson in 3 counties. I was their representative. And I realized that was the kind of environment that I really wanted to be in and thrive in, was in policy, was in helping see change from our elected officials, our leaders come to fruition to follow those ideals and those goals. And it sort of launched me where I'm at. I sort of took on every opportunity I could in my career, whether it was managing airports, being an interim police chief, serving on KITCOM 911 regional emergency management boards, all to sort of further what I call the retail part of the skill set, learning how the operations actually work from the ground up, which I think is what's put me here today. In terms of character, I think that's the only thing we have. And my favorite saying is let our yes be yes and our less no be no out of the Bible. We only get one reputation, and the good name is better than great riches. And that's a fundamental belief I've always had. Integrity, trust, truth, and transparency. Once we lose that, in my experience, you don't get it back. My heart is in public service. I'm currently in the private sector as a developer. I've been doing that for a few years, and it's interesting. It's great work. And as I was telling staff this morning, I completed a really robust project recently, about 6 months ago. Got a very nice payday for that. And I said, okay, now what? And throughout this whole interstitial period between my last city manager role and here, I've been engaged in consulting in the municipal sector, leading retreats, counseling with my peers, with different mayors around the state, around the country, and then giving back through a 501c3 I have called Flagler Veterans Village, helping young people grow entrepreneurship, helping house homeless veterans, and just helping the community wherever we can. So I always come back to this public service element and realize that my wife said, that's just where you belong. You're not going to get away from it. So here I am.
Cool. Some of the things that interested me about your resume was Palm Coast being a scatter lot community with similar size, a little bit smaller than Palm Bay. Also aging infrastructure, water treatment issues. So can you tell me about your experience there, how you navigated those issues, and why you would be a good fit for Palm Bay? And I think you've done a lot of homework on Palm Bay. I think I've seen you in some of our meetings. Yes. So I appreciate you doing that. So thank you.
Infrastructure is a challenge. It's difficult in any environment. I've noticed in Palm Bay, I think you're about $315 million in debt to some infrastructure with about an $85 million interest, coming due over the term for your roads and some other capital. 13 capital issues and 2 leases is what I understand. Infrastructure is difficult. it's a generational rooftop issue. A lot of folks, when they move into a community, they're not paying that initial capital cost for infrastructure, so it gets skipped a generation. Without infrastructure, you don't grow. Without infrastructure, you can't meet the demands of regulation, whether it's environmental or local community preference. I've built water and sewer plants from the ground up, including siting, negotiation of contract. We worked a lot with Veolia Water, if you've ever heard of them, and North American Water, working on water and wastewater plants. The best run city I ever saw had an 80-year CIP, recognizing that every capital facility has a life, and they were funding that CIP. So I think building infrastructure is part of the conversation you have. I think you see your budget every year, and you've got money in and money out, and it balances, and maybe there's some money for priorities. But truly accounting on the utility side, infrastructure side, for the total life cycle asset cost, what is that true cost to the community now and in the future, as that debt and that obligation takes away other opportunity? And then what's the maintenance, renewal, rehabilitation, and replacement schedule? And so I hope I'm answering your question, but I think if you were not looking at infrastructure as a long-term continuous obligation, because when you're not building, you're maintaining, and when you're not maintaining, you're modernizing, and when you're not modernizing, you're meeting your next set of NPDES or other discharge or wastewater or coliform requirements. And so it's one of those things that requires a lot of continual energy investment, and frankly, very good people who understand that game to be managing it and monitoring it.
Thank you. I just have one last question before I pass. Your experience as a developer, was that commercial, residential, and that skill set that you have and relationships that you have, what does that look like as far as bringing economic development to Palm Bay, industrial, commercial, jobs?
So economic development starts with you. It starts with the community. It's focusing on what those priorities are. I don't believe in the shotgun approach. I believe in entrepreneurial ecosystems as your first on-ramp to generating that enthusiasm, those connections, that economy, grabbing those entrepreneurs. It's also farming the current economic climate you have. You got a lot of businesses here that should be grown and helped and continued, and then focusing in on your major employers and what ecosystem can you build around there. One of my big coups at Palm Coast was we brought the Boston Whaler big boat division out of Edgewater to Palm Coast. I'm assuming Edgewater never thought half of Boston Whaler would pack up and leave. So what are our strategies around retaining and growing and encouraging those businesses to continue to invest? From the development side, I think I had two choices, coming out of my semi-retirement there for a little bit. It was either going to be go back to school and get a PhD or go into the private sector. My wife said the skill set in the private sector, I think, would be a better fit for what I wanted to do long term. So we've worked on a few industrial parks. We have one in motion right now. So learning the development game, for those who know it, understanding what a blank raw dirt costs, whether it's for a lot or an industrial park, what we lose in the entitlement phase, the permitting phase. More importantly, on the commercial and industrial, we've gone out ahead of the actual groundbreaking while we're still in due diligence. And this is an important piece, I think, for the city. You've got to target and recruit those targeted specific industries, in my experience, that you want to see here. There's a lot of competition in the marketplace, as you know. So your plan, your face forward, your opportunity cost, your attractiveness in that regional network, how are you marketing that, and how are we going to market that to the industries you want to attract? Then it's development. Then it's, okay, we know who, how, what we prefer. Now we go build a facility. It's how we do it in the private sector. So then we know we're cash flow positive, hopefully, when we open the doors. May not pay down all the debt on it, but we're at least generating the revenue to make it sustainable.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to start at the other end now. Councilman Langevin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for being here, Mr. Morton. My first question for you is, who's your favorite founding father of the United States and why?
It's got to be George Washington, and it's not an easy one. I used to admire Lincoln. I admired Jefferson for a while. I admired TDR for a while, but I think back to the character question, the most important thing we have is character. And one of my personal mission statement has always been, what's the point of any of us having any kind of power or authority if we're not using it to relentlessly empower others? And I think part of that is the willingness to step away from saying, I want the credit, I did this, I'm so great, I accomplished, because I've found in my career the best things I've ever accomplished have been a team effort. And what I admire about George Washington is his humility to step away from his role. He walked away from the presidency when he had a lock. He could have been the president who knows how long. We would have had a second king of England. And so that humility, the best other way I can describe this is when I was at the executive course at Harvard, I had the great distinction of meeting a gentleman by the name of Dan Fenn, who worked with Eleanor Roosevelt to establish her World Affairs Council. and also was on JFK's board. So he was an advisor to John F. Kennedy. He said JFK's first state dinner, they're down, JFK's really nervous, he's running around, and this is the man that was there telling me the story. It was incredible. He says, he walked up to the guy putting butter out on the plates, and he said, I would like you to put 2 pats of butter on the plate. And the guy looked at him and said, nope, and kept doing what he's doing. And he said, do you know who I am? And he said, yes, sir, you're the president of the United States. Do you know who I am? And Dan said, JFK got this look on his face like, he goes, I'm the man who decides how many pats of butter to put out on the plate. That JFK walked away from that, not angry, not frustrated, not humiliated, recognizing that part of leadership is stepping back, letting those people you've empowered, that you've asked, that you've required to do their job, let them go do their job. And so,
No, phenomenal answer. Thank you.
Question.
And then my second question is, what is your philosophy on taxation and government spending, and how do you balance the two?
Ooh, we're in trouble. Local government. It's already been tough. We're already in a resource constraint position. I don't think we'll wholesale eliminate ad valorem tax, but I think we'll see significant reductions, probably through ad valorem protections, homestead exemption increases. Now we're hearing the sales tax will be reduced. May or may not have direct impacts, but it's going to have indirect impacts, local government option tax and other funding sources that I think we usually see the outflow of sales tax. So resources are more challenging than ever. They're going to be. And this community has a big wish list, and more importantly, a big needs list. The best way to balance the budget and prioritize resources is you folks. You and the community have got to decide what your most important priorities are and go after them wholeheartedly. And that's one of the things I see here consistently is great ideas, great plans that get put on the shelf to collect dust without the strategic ability or capability or freedom to go say, no, this is our most important goal. We've prioritized it. We've allocated staff. We understand what our metrics are. We understand what our accomplishment needs to be. And we're not going to stop until we accomplish that. That's what we did with MedNexus in Palm Coast and how we brought together JU, UNF, Advent, Halifax, Johnson & Johnson, 3 medical laboratories, is understanding your most important goals and funding those. And that's going to include your capital infrastructure. I don't think the city or any city in the state of Florida can cut their way out of the deficit that they have. And I would venture to guess this city's probably $3 billion in overdue infrastructure or aging infrastructure, if that's the real number. So it's going to be critically important to understand the priorities, build that connection that the community agrees with those priorities, being strategic in how we execute, and never stop being entrepreneurial in the way we try to cut. Since we can't cut our way out, how do we grow? And just a quick example, when we did the tennis center, again, I use Palm Coast a lot. We went out, I spent a week with the USTA, I spent a week in Lake Nona, meeting the Olympic coaches, and we said, great, we're going to build this wonderful community recreation facility. What can we do to offset the ongoing M&O from day one? We got doctors to sign letters of intent for leases. We got medical providers to sign physical therapy letters of intent. That little bit of money, that $200,000 a year, freed up for another priority. So sometimes it's incremental, sometimes it's small, sometimes we hit a home run, but I think it's got to be that panoply of solutions if we want to succeed.
Awesome. Great answers. And thank you. I yield, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Hamm?
If given the chance, what do you see in your first 90 days?
I just answered this for staff. It's got to be understanding where the real priorities lie. I mean, I can do anything, and there's an organizational axiom when you hire a new employee. At a junior level, it takes a year. You take more from the organization than you give. And at a higher level, hopefully it's 6 months. The learning, the understanding, the community connections, understanding the wills of council, understanding where the skeletons in the closet are and the true deficits and shortcomings. So without spending that initial game time trying to develop the relationship, build trust and transparency, we can't work together until we begin to trust each other and have that level of transparency. And me being honest and accounting for what I'm seeing in the books and in the operation and in the organization and the plans at City Hall to say, this is sort of the take stock period. A lot of times in the past when I've applied for positions, they have you do a 90-day, what's your 90-day strategy? Without a plan, you're doing nothing. So my 90-day strategy is really get through the surface, through the cover of the book, and understand where the community is really at and be able to report that, not just to you, but collectively as a staff team to say, now we more fully and openly understand where we're at. How do we start analyzing and attacking priorities? How do we start aligning for a successful future? And until we really know everything, I'm just throwing darts at a wall, which isn't going to be helpful for anybody.
I really like you've done your homework on our city. And I like your experience with the industrial park. Is that something that you think you can bring to fruition here in Palm Bay for our compound? Because that's going to be one of the big steps. And like I said, I am extremely thankful that you've done your homework and you kind of know some of the things that we're going through. And I thank you for bringing that to us. But that's one of the things that's big for us right now, and it's not just in the media, it's in our hearts, it's in our community, it's in the people that come in here every time. um, I think it's one of the biggest things, as well as our bayfront. I think we're an untapped resource there. What's something that you bring in just outside looking in that you would do for that?
So, I'm a big believer in having a blueprint, having a strategy instead of just, going out. And I spent a lot of time trying to look at your employers, L3 Harris, the county, different folks, you as a big city employer, a big employer in the county, excuse me. Industrial park's a great thing. And I think, the old numbers used to be, and they're probably in the ballpark, although I might have the numbers wrong. For every dollar residence generates in tax, it requires about $1.47 in services, and industrial's the opposite. Commercial is the opposite. 40 cents it requires for every dollar it generates. I really am a big believer. I went to the National Mayor's Conference years back. Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation invited me out to Kansas City. It was a great week. And I really believe in that entrepreneurial ecosystem. So us having plans as a city is one thing, but understanding our role in facilitating development, I think, is more important. Where are we at to make this real? And then my experience from the private sector and 25 years in government would say, who are we trying to attract to an industrial park? That's probably the most important question. What businesses are we looking for? One of the most successful industrial projects I ever did was helping a small business with machine lathes that are about as big as a Volkswagen bus. And he taught me this and understood. He said, I have these equipments. I'm currently manufacturing actuators for Korean Airlines. I said, great. A year later, find out his Korean Airlines contract is gone. He says, no problem. I thought about this. I'm going to manufacture, it's already in the books, golf club heads for Ping and bicycle forks for Specialized Mountain Bikes. He says, my whole workforce, we're pivoting. We're ready. So what industries are we bringing that support your biggest industries here? I'm guessing it's space, aerospace, national defense. What ecosystem do they want to see? And more importantly, in my mind, would be what ecosystem can pivot? What businesses can pivot and have that flexibility so you don't wake up one day and your biggest employer, no one thought Boeing would ever leave Seattle. They moved more than half of their operations to the Midwest, left a huge hole in the region. What are we doing to build the support network? The three-legged stool is what I call it, that when one leg's gone, you're still standing on two. And so I think you've got a unique opportunity as best you can. Yeah, take some businesses, get some ROI, get some things happening in the industrial environment, but spend energy, because once it's developed and built, it's developed and built. What can you do for the next 10 years, 20 years that it's not instant gratification in ED, as you guys know, it takes time, but that would be my advice. And in my role, what we've done and what I've learned is we've gone after the businesses first. We go out, we've met with industry, we've met with a couple steel companies, different groups, and we've said, what's it going to take? What does it look like? What do you need? Is it proximity to rail? Do you need 1 million gallons of water a day because you're washing some complex process? Do you need power that I've got to go negotiate with FPL how to get you here to get the resources? Do you need a tier 3 fiber, dark fiber connection? Once we understand the needs of who we're trying to attract, then we go and start designing and figuring out the land. The land piece to me is the easiest piece. It's making sure that we don't have another ribbon cutting and it's vacant for, and I'm not talking about you guys in specific, but I've seen that in my career too many times. And it sits vacant and it never gets life. And life's never breathed into it because I never thought about the end user. They started with an idea, not with the end goal where you want to be in mind.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councilman Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate you doing your homework as well. Especially now I can get even more detailed on some of these questions because you have a sense of where we are as a city. To start off, and I'll branch off with a few questions, starting with this one. Our $150 million road bond program, we're at a deficit of $70 million. How would you address this kind of funding gap? And also to your point of the critical infrastructure projects we see forth in the future, i.e. the expansion of Malabar widening, St. John's Heritage Parkway. I'm assuming, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, you're looking to stay in this position for a while.
I would love never have to go anywhere again. I'm done bouncing.
Yes, sir. So with that, if you were selected, these will fall under your reign. So
yeah, so road funding is challenging, and you're not just at the end of a huge renewal project, but now you're paying the debt service on that, which is the most difficult part, because instead of having additional funds to go out and take opportunity, you're paying debt service down, which I get. I mean, at that point. So road funding is very challenging everywhere. It's not unique to Palm Bay. Again, successful strategies we've had in the past is waiting for windows of opportunity. I'll give a brief example, may or may not be relevant in the scheme here, but just to give you an example of how I think, and I do. Early in my career also, I got to meet Mike Vance, who was the guy who invented the term think outside the box. He worked for Walt Disney and taught me some really unique strategies on how to storyboard city problems to find solutions. And we implemented that, and we had been saving some road money, waiting for the right projects. And you guys may not know or remember, but there was a time 5 years, 6 years ago, asphalt had been at $128 a ton, which is one of the significant material costs. It had fallen down to $48 a ton, and I said, $3 for one. Every nickel we can find that we've saved, that we've squirreled, that we've strategically waited for, let's go. And we were able to essentially, outside of mobilization and some other things, we're able to triple our accomplishment in pavement life. Again, you're hopefully going to get 20 years out of that roadway. So the road you just did, we got to continue to plan. Simple strategies that I've used too is doing a PVS, pavement condition, making sure you understand your current true pavement condition. You've probably done that. Making sure your classification system is up to date. A lot of your roads, if you don't have the right form checked out, right, you won't be eligible for state or federal or other grant opportunities. That's the high level. And then, I mean, it's hard, but at the end of the day, it's going to go back. We can get creative as we want, and we will, but it goes back to what are our priorities. If that's the priority, where are we going to find, how are we going to fund through a mixture of revenue, savings, new revenue opportunities, grant opportunities, getting the work done. It's not cheap, and it's going to be continual. And that's what I found with all infrastructure. The best city, I think I may have mentioned this already, that I've seen had an 80-year CIP and funded it. Realizing that I'm going to go build a sewer plant. I know you got a WRF that's behind, but it should be open in July. That's great. It's going to be fantastic. But have we done a true LCAC cost to say, in 50 years when it's done, or it needs complete rehabilitation or new technology, have we been saving? Are we empowering the next two generations of Palm Bay? Or are they going to be in the same boat and it's going to be their problems? I like to come at it that way of, we got to do what we got to do today and do the best we can. But I'm also a believer in let's get people prepared for better success tomorrow. And I want everyone to take this the right way. From what I'm finding, there's a lot of missed opportunities over the last decades that have in some way put you guys in the position you're in now. Not blaming anyone for anything wrong. People make decisions, but you're suffering that fate that a lot of communities are, getting to a point realizing, wait a minute, the past 40 years of councils and citizens, we didn't plan for this infrastructure. We didn't understand the growth pattern. We didn't know, and it doesn't matter. We still have to take accountability and deal with it, deal with those situations.
Thank you. Last question, for now, at least. Over my past 6 years and going into even in my doctorate program, I took a course, and one of the case studies spoke about how sometimes, they would say it was council, changing the information, but then in other cases, it come to find out it was more so staff would provide partial information, and council's supposed to make a full decision off of partial information. I hear your faith, sir, and I have the same faith. So I wanted to ask you, because you spoke about, the first 90 days of figuring things out, hearing from staff, hearing from other stakeholders, but the discernment level of things. Because even with agenda items in the past, it will be worded in such ways or construed in such ways of, this is a cost savings, or this isn't really this, or change orders for that sense. Like it's multifaceted.
I hear what you're saying. I've seen it all. I've seen
Okay.
burying the lead in the agenda, and we're going to wait till the public goes home because the controversial items at the bottom. I've seen not intentionally and intentionally. Oh, we don't want to tell the full story, and there can't be information asymmetry. That's one of the biggest failures of organizations. I abhor it personally. I like to tell staff, and I have in the past, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. Oftentimes it's just because I sit at the top of the pyramid and I get to see the information. We all need to have that same information exchange, or none of us can serve this community properly. And so, finding in, discerning, understanding the truth. I think a lot of times, especially new council members, you get told, oh, we had cash coming in. Here's our $50 million we got, and here's our expenditures, $49,999. And in the middle, we were able to accomplish a couple of priorities, but we're not talking about the bigger problem and the costs, and we can go build a sidewalk. We're going to M&O that for eternity. I mean, until it's not. We are, and that's a cost every year. So, I do appreciate that, and that is one of the things I believe too, is running towards our problems, not away. And when we're transparent, even when it's painful, that's the most important time. Just say, hey guys, community, whomever, this is what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? Are you seeing the same thing? And what are we thinking collectively about that?
Thank you. So I want to touch into the aspect of industrial park, your experience as a developer and as a city manager for a thriving city that experienced the exponential growth that we have over the last several years. So my question's more geared towards, in your experience, how can we bring that type of industry here once council decides that this is the avenue we want to go? Because I'm hearing that this panel will be giving you the direction as city manager. This is what our priority is. We want this job creation opportunity. So what contacts, what opportunities have you seen that you've already bought into from your Palm Coast experience and as a developer for commercial as well?
Yeah, so everything starts with relationship in my experience, and every project we've ever done, I'll go back to MedNexus. That was a huge, it's not only a state of Florida priority, it was a huge priority for Palm Coast to embrace 21st century medical careers and all the investment that came with that.
Did you say Halifax, sir?
We had Advent was our primary partner.
Okay.
We had Daytona State College, Dr. Tom Labasso. We had some tertiary involvement with Halifax, but our two primary medical partners were Daytona State, vis-a-vis Maury Husseini, and University of North Florida brought Advent Health. Our local CFO at the time was Wally Aquino. Everyone said, hey, this is great. So if I forget part of your question, please don't forget to poke on me a little bit. But it starts with relationship, local level, state level, community level, legislators, lobbyists, targeted industries. Without that relationship, everybody's competing for a lot of the same business. Your unique opportunity, I think, is being on the Space Coast. So you have this little extra high bar that very only Texas, right, has in around the new economy of tomorrow. And so first is creating that relationship. It's understanding the needs and requirements and assets. I think we all made the mistake as communities 25 years ago when Walmart would want to come to town. Everyone wanted the Walmart so bad that they would put in a $200 million infrastructure line, all these things, and the revenue never comes back, right? So I think we've all grown and learned a little bit. I think 10 years ago it was the Amazon warehouse. We just need an Amazon warehouse. And so we keep looking for these panaceas, and they're not there generally to our ills. And so I would say in an industrial park situation, it's really identifying who the industries or sectors of industry that you're looking for, recognizing there's some business industries we're gonna take or want regardless. Again, you got to get things moving cash flow positive. Let's not make that mistake. But targeting specific industries, building those connections, those relationships. We've also simultaneously, you got to be marketing the rationale of your community as to why these employers want a workforce. They want to know their workforce is stable. Do they have work? Do you have appropriate diversity age of housing stock to support a diversified workforce, right? So how do you continue to build those little pieces to get to that goal where people aren't just, I think the key is to be more transformational than transactional. I can go tomorrow. I know a gentleman, he just did a huge industrial park project. I'm not being coy, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. It's under an NDA. And we understand from the development side, and I think most developers and cities can communicate what's required. But until we build those relationships, understand the direction and the long-term capacity of what it is, again, we need that blueprint. So could I go tomorrow and talk to people? Yes, I think we could, especially if we said, hey, we got this tract of land. I was able to bring somebody down into Palm Coast recently in a week, and we flew in from the Northeast and said, I like working industrial projects in Florida. I have two successful ones I just did, one in Daytona. Let's work on this connection. But for this city, I think it's so important that as you have a unique opportunity, again, your built environment has opportunity yet to be built. You know it's already built, and that's not going to change in the near term. It just can't. And part of your dilemma that I see in the research is we've got to be careful on what's attracted, doesn't unintentionally create a zone of discard in your current existing commercial sector. The worst thing you can also do is make something so attractive or so open that the people who are investing in parts of town that need sidewalk, placemaking, beautification, infrastructure said, you know what, it's not worth investing here anymore. I'm going to go to the new spot. That's a tragedy we've seen too many communities make. So we're trying to have a very big conversation, 30,000 foot, and I hope I'm respecting you enough to answer it properly.
No, great perspective.
Yeah, but those are the things that go through my mind when I think about, yes, there's opportunity, but understand the opportunity cost, understand the risk cost, and it's going to be somewhere in that zone where we say, yes, we want to promote, enhance, encourage, and continue to develop the areas of town that are struggling. I saw more abandoned buildings around than I thought I would in the town a couple weeks ago when I drove through, and I think you have some great adaptive reuse situations, but not at the expense of mutually excluding, I keep whacking that, mutually excluding new growth and preserving what we have.
Yeah, that's an outstanding perspective. I'm going to switch a little bit of the gear because my colleague did speak about our traffic conditions, and you're well
Yes.
answered that, and I know you could expound on that more. But I want you to give us an example of an ethical dilemma that you were faced with, how you resolved it, and what you learned from that experience.
The best ethical dilemma ever was, well, maybe this is the one I should use, but we struggled with how to resolve sort of an echoing of concerns and complaints from the community around specific issues coming out of COVID, very tumultuous, as you recall. And again, my philosophy: don't run away, run to. And I just determined really quickly the only way we get the public engaged and get our trust and show we got nothing behind the curtain was we brought in outside investigator to investigate a human resources issue. And I advised the council, I advised the community, I said, this is the most transparent, forward thinking, it's going to cost us some money, but I want everyone to understand exactly this is an issue that deserves the full sun. We're already in the sunshine, but deserves the full sunshine. And so my ethical position is hopefully you don't get yourself in an ethical dilemma. Hopefully your personal values and visions, you have your own personal mission statement. Matters of style, bend like a reed, matters of substance, stand firm as a rock, and you're not putting yourself in those positions. But even when they're not there and it's the smoke of it, and we want to disinfect it, run to it, address it full-heartedly, and be as transparent as possible. Again, I don't know if that's answering your question, but that's the best recent ethical dilemma that I've had.
Well, thank you. Deputy Mayor?
You spent some time in City of Duval. You were hired there as a city admin when they didn't have a city administrator for
Correct.
16 years.
Yes.
What did that look like during your time? And that city being so small, how did you land the position at Palm Coast?
Yeah, that was really fun being in Duval, and we were the high-tech, one of the high-tech epicenters there. We had 3 gangs in town, Apple, Microsoft, and Google. It was a very interesting community, and I saw that opportunity. I've always been one that likes to create and take on, like I said, the hard tasks. Whether in the past I volunteered to be police chief, I volunteered to be airport manager, on and on. And I saw just such a spectacular opportunity to come into a city that really was struggling administratively, financially, sense of vision, sense of connection. What is their, same as you, what is their bigger picture and purpose? How do they sustain for the future? And being able to build those blocks, work with the community, work with our stakeholders, build new relationships for them, work with our state legislature to be able to do that. In terms of how that translated into an opportunity in Palm Coast, I was told it was just because of the what I called, again, the retail, the breadth of experience that I had in my career, always looking for additional education, looking to learn, looking to grow, and just building a network wherever I was. I had close relationships with the Washington State Legislature. I've had close relationships with members Travis Hudson and Paul Renner. Now we lose some of their leadership, but here, and so building those networks, and frankly, I don't care what anyone thinks, the favor of God. I mean, I just was blessed. I knew that was my opportunity when I applied. I put it in, and we had already started doing homework. And funny enough, my wife and I said, okay, we think we were led here. We go to the local mall in Washington State and go up the escalator. My wife's going to buy me this Tommy Bahama shirt I've wanted my whole life, and I never had one. We get up to the top of the escalator. We were just talking and praying, and the sign right there in Bellevue, Washington said, "Welcome to the Palm Coast Collection." And we were like, here we are. So I don't have much more of an explanation.
Thank you. Can you tell us about the Medical Nexus P3
Yes.
in Palm Coast, and also the CRM that improved customer service and metrics? Can you talk about those 2 items?
Yeah, the MedNexus was awesome. I mean, that was just a great. That was a council who knew what their most important thing they could do for the community, their most important goal. They committed fully to seeing that come to pass, and it was a long process of, picking up the phone, meeting people, realizing we had opposition, strategically analyzing who's in our corner, who doesn't want to see this, what are our challenges, right? how do we bring the right players to the party? How do we bring business and convince them this is a wonderful idea? What do we do to incentivize? That was part of that hackathon we did. To sort of first time in the state of Florida anyone did a hackathon. Was let's use another model that we know works in the business sector and attract young talent, entrepreneurship, engage people, excite people. UNF was excited, Advent was excited, and so, you know, again, it was an entire team of people with a sole focus on something that was so incredibly important to see accomplished. In terms of the CRM, you know, that was more directed. That was in motion when I arrived. When I say motion, some of the contracts were already starting. They had done an analysis with Deloitte, which turned out not to be helpful for us as a community. We said, hey, we got to time out and really understand this new platform. I don't know how deep you want me to get into it, but change management is difficult, even when it's good change. It was a big change to change the CRM with the city. But the outworking with that was Palm Coast Connect, which we used to manage hurricane, I believe it was Dorian. It's the first time that a CRM had been used to manage hurricane response. And we used it internally and externally. And then, of course, that I think was one of the main reasons we won that Polco ICMA Voice of the People, Transformations and Foundations of Livability, was being more accessible. And so technology is one thing, but it's the human element behind that technology. I've seen technology initiatives, they promise to reduce costs, and they don't. You shift the money to IT and the new technology. But it was the people behind that CRM that put it together, that worked tireless hours to say, what is it our customers really need and want, and how creative can we get with the technology, which is also what enabled us to run a virtual city hall for 6 months during COVID. We delivered 95% of our services through our digital platforms, with of course, at that point, no one knew any better, minimal human contact.
Thank you. I just have one more question, unless I don't want to be selfish with the time.
Oh, let me go to Councilman Langevin.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have one more follow-on question, and it's really just an opportunity for you to explain and clear the air, because obviously for all the candidates, you know, the first thing I did was a quick Google search, and so did a lot of our residents. And so I think with you, the first thing that comes up is I think there was some maybe some personality disputes with your previous council. And so I just want to allow you to explain that. And before you do, I know I've met councilmen from all over the state, and every time I do, I feel blessed with the council that we have here. And so I think it's probably, you know, it'll be okay, but I just want to give you the opportunity to clear that.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, there's not a whole lot to clear. We did a lot of tremendous work. The last 6 months were difficult. They very much were. You know, we left on good terms. Even one of the council members that we were butting heads a little bit on me holding an ethical line, even at the expense of my job. I take my integrity seriously. 3 days after I resigned, I met him at a local restaurant and sat there with him for 2 hours and gave him every bit of information that he asked me for in my mind to try to help him succeed. So I will take an ethical approach, and I won't be bullied by any council member. It's the first time it ever happened to me, but I realized right away my integrity is more important than my job. I have to live with myself. And so, long story short, as the record will demonstrate, nothing ever came of anything. There was never any issues. I got a wonderful apology letter from the city about 1.5 years ago from the sitting mayor. I have that. I think I submitted actually to the city here. Yeah. And so it's a difficulty. It's a chapter that happened, and I learned a lot, I think, about myself and maybe some improvement in communication styles when things start to get that difficult, even when it seems impossible. I had always had the philosophy that when I'm having trouble with someone, you work more closely, not around. And with one of the council members, I didn't want to engage there for a hot minute, because I just didn't see it being productive, and that may have been the wrong choice. Maybe I should have got a third party if he was willing to come in and us have a mentorship session or a clear the air session or something. But that's unfortunately Google's Google.
Yeah, awesome. I just wanted you to be able to clear that up for anybody that just Googled you and had preconceived notions on that. So I appreciate it. I'm going to yield.
Well, thank you. So let's tag a little bit on that, because since he allowed you to clear the air, Mr. Morton, I'm going to yield my time. But I wanted to just give you an opportunity. How long ago was this?
3.5, 4 years.
Okay. And so in 3.5, 4 years of you having, and I admire that, I wholeheartedly believe that ethics is critical. So I want to thank you for that. So right now do they have a city manager?
No.
And is the same city manager that replaced you Is he still there?
No,
Or
she's
obviously
not there. They've
Okay.
gone through at least one city attorney, I think 3 city managers, and the council has turned over, I think 3 or 4 times. School board turned over, county turned over. It's Flagler County's been a very, very challenging environment for success.
Thank you, Mr. Morton. Carry on, Councilman Hammer.
But one of my big things that just me personally, I have brought to the table was my experience in our city and the direct need for accountability. What's your take on accountability? Do you think things can be worked through? Do you like to train people from within, or do you like to have the best people for the job in the position at that time?
So accountability is the key. When I talk about the leadership continuum, it's leading, it's serving and mentoring and growing, and none of it works without accountability. Without accountability, whether it's a practical, a qualitative issue, whether it's a quantitative issue. So if it's data driven or human driven, without accountability, we're not being honest with ourselves. And I think for too long we treat accountability as a dirty word. Then people don't want to be accountable. Then we get information asymmetry, and it's a spiral. So I think protecting acts of leadership, letting people grow and learn. Failure is the most authentic way in which we learn, but we have an obligation to fail once, fail quickly, never fail that way again, and move on. So we just can't do it without accountability. All of us have to be accountable, collectively, individually, corporately. And I just totally lost the second half of your question. I'm sorry. I had the answer and now it's gone.
Whether you lost it or not, you answered it.
Oh, perfect.
Councilman,
Hiring from within. Let me answer that piece. I love promoting passionate, hardworking people who have built a reputation already. My philosophy has always been, and it bears out my whole career, when we're deep in bureaucracy, when we have the backup and the backup, that is your golden opportunity to hire exclusively for character and a new skill set, rather than, what is the adage? If you want something you never have, you got to try something you've never done. And so in some departments, I did it with assistants, I've done it with economic development directors. If they've got this robust skill set, that's we're not getting the result. We've done the same thing over and over. This person's got amazing character, amazing, continuum sphere of experience and education. Sometimes I've given that a shot and thank God, not been disappointed. So yes, hire from within, but also not be afraid to break the mold sometimes when we can.
thank you. Councilman Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. Last question. So we have council meetings every first and third Thursdays. Typically, the second hour, I will say, is public comments of the public sharing concerns of things that haven't been addressed. They voice it to us, council, but we all have full-time jobs outside of this. But they voice it to us because they see a lack of movement or efficiency. When you see in your past or moving forward, if you were to have this position, how would you address extensive public comments, recognizing that some things may have been missed or may have not been fully addressed, which brought the public out on a Thursday evening to share their concerns?
So be very candid and not disparaging anyone, but a couple things I saw at the council meetings I came to were some self-inflicted wounds that we shouldn't have inflicted on ourselves as a city. And I saw that. I will bring up the examples, and I was like, wow. If we'd had an ombudsman or if someone was following up more diligently, they should never come to council and gotten that far. In my opinion, people should be getting their questions answered and things resolved. That's the first piece that I saw missed. My philosophy in Palm Coast and Duval and on was, I'm taking notes when citizens are speaking. Hopefully I've seen you do it, Mayor, direct, hey, if we can answer the question and it's appropriate, great. If not, what I've always asked people is, please don't leave the council chambers. If you do, you got my number. I may not have the answer, but let's find the right answer before you go. And my other philosophy that I've always asked staff to agree to, regardless of whatever else I got going on, is if you get a phone call, answer it the same day. I'm sorry, even if you just call and say, I'm sorry, I got your message, it's 6 o'clock, I'm booked up, I don't have the answer, but I'm going to get you the answer. You will hear from me by Friday, right? Let's not leave people lost in the void. It takes time, again, building trust with the community to say, yep, they're consistent. Consistency is clarity, is the key. But that's how I engage that. We'll find the answer if we don't have it. We'll point people in the right direction to the answer. But answering questions, again, let's stop the self-inflicted wounds and let's hopefully do a better job at answering questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just throw on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. How would others rate your trustworthiness?
How
would others rate your trustworthiness? 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest.
Well, that's a good self-reflection. I'm going to say an 8, because you even when you're doing the right thing and you think you're doing the right thing, doesn't mean everyone's going to agree with you, and that gets translated into you're an awful person. Sometimes you got to say no to things because it's the right thing, because we have a more important thing to say yes to. That reflects. Back to Jefferson, I don't believe in coity necessarily, but I think that authenticity, to have the courage to say no, but to also say, what can we say yes to? I may say no to you on something you want, but how do we build that relationship more? So I think the best answer is to go ahead and query the dozens of people that I've ever worked with, senior staff, junior staff, people below me, people on the public works line, officers that were, just new line officers, that I value trust, I value truth, and I won't ask anyone to do what I won't model myself.
Yes, sir. It's one of those leadership classes, right, from Maxwell. The 21 principles of leadership. You have others rate yourself.
Okay.
So, yes, sir. So what, and you've got just over 4 minutes.
Okay.
Why would you be the best fit as city manager for the city of Palm Bay?
I knew that was going to come up, and I tried to Google and AI every answer, and it was not good. So AI said, lead with humility, and then leave a sales pitch at the end. And well, you guys got a tough job, and you guys know the community more than anybody. I'm here for an opportunity that I think was a great fit. I really did think it was a great fit. I think the only thing I can say is, having done retail my whole life, working from the ground up, like a lot of companies, they only promote from within the ground up. I've given me a broad experience. Life has taught me some great lessons. To give you an insight into my character is the best thing I'll leave you with as the best fit. When I was dying of cancer in the hospital 12 years ago, after 2 years of chemotherapy and a full stem cell transplant, I was named Virginia Mason Hospital's Patient Hero of the Year. I got to do TV ads, and I was on buses, and one day my son comes running in with his phone. He was about 9. Dad, you're on my phone. You're on an app. I was on a commercial. So even through the midst of my darkest trial, right, this was my best moment. Even through the midst of that, I found a way, because it was on my heart. How do I help the hospital staff do better? Watch these people, watching people die every day and slaving over me like I'm the only person they deal with, and I know that's not true. How do I sit with the patients in the waiting room that are dying, and they are, and the looks of just fear and dread on their face, knowing what I have in my life, right? God already told me where I'm going. I'm not worried about it. So that moment of character is the same character. That's the only thing I can commit. Can I commit I'm going to bring an awesome industrial park? No, we're going to give it our best shot. Can I solve all your problems? Probably not. The whole staff, we might be able to start tackling them. But I will commit to you that I will bring my best character and capability and authenticity to you every day. That's what I can commit to. And that's why I think I'm good. But you guys will decide who's the best.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. The last question I had asked, or wanted to ask, Councilman Langevin touched on it. There's 3 minutes. Anybody has any other questions? Maybe just closing statement.
Oh, closing statement?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah, closing
I didn't prepare a closing statement either.
Closing arguments?
Closing arguments. No, I really thank you for the opportunity to be, and I mean that sincerely. It was a lot of soul searching, prioritizing my family for the last couple of years. And despite the financial success that I have achieved in the private sector, realizing that's not where I want to be. It's always been, I told a great story upstairs. I'll tell it real quick. We had a guy in our community years ago named Stanley, didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. He talked years and years and years about this hat that he wanted, this Tommy Bahama sun hat. We live in Washington State. He wants this Tommy. I don't want him going back to Tommy Bahama. This is the true story. I resigned after 11 years because I had just a tremendous opportunity for something really great. And he comes in and he says, Matt, I take my hat off to you. And I was like, thanks, Stanley. I really appreciate that. That's great. He walked out the door, and I chased him down. I said, Stanley, lift your head. He goes, that's for you. I take my hat off to you. I still have that hat hanging up in my office. That is what public service means to me. What are we doing for others? Are we esteeming others greater than ourselves? If we're not, we're in the wrong business. It isn't just a tagline on my LinkedIn page that if we have power, we're not relentlessly empowering others, then get out of the way. In fact, I'll challenge you. If you guys are really serious about moving forward, not caring who gets the credit, elevating this entire community above ourselves, above each and every one of you, above elections, of elevating ourselves to a good position to do something for the future, I want to be here. And I told this to Scott 2 months ago. And if you don't, I don't want to be here. So I'd ask you also to your closing arguments to check yourself and say, are we really ready to give it all we've got? And I'll do the best I can. I can't promise you anything other than I will do everything I know how to do and learn some new things to try to make that happen.
Thank you. with a minute to spare, we'll go on a 10-minute recess.